Every time I see a slow moving progress bar with no idea of when it's going to finish, I think of Office Space.
Who's going to tweet about it?
With no idea of when it's going to finish. Okay. I get to hear that replayed right back at me too. Fantastic. All right, let's get rolling.
Okay.
I'll share the URL? Yeah, I'm going to share ZenHub here.
No, I mean on Twitter. There's a live stream.
Oh, sure.
Or I don't know if I can.
Can you share
I
that?
can do it. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can.
I'll post it to Gitter.
Yeah, I have the URL from the top left. I have to see if I can reach accounts.
Okay. Posted to Gitter. You've got Twitter, I guess?
Yep.
And then I'll share my screen. Cool. All right, so I wrote up some kind of quick summary notes from this morning. I don't know if people would prefer to kind of look at the bulleted version or more the usual ZenHub view. Preference?
I'm excited about your bulleted view.
All right. If anyone does want to, I don't think we're going to really need to take too many notes, but if you want to, I left the link into kind of the shared doc where we can all edit. There's nothing in there right now. But feel free to also just leave comments or anything on the GitHub issue if there's anything you want to make sure gets captured. This was recently opened, so 2980 is where we're working here. But yeah, so from this previous sprint, kind of skipping to the end there, well, I'll go through these a little bit more in detail, but we had quite a bit of feedback that kind of came in toward the beginning of the sprint, and a lot of things we were able to address across connectors and the online service, and the browser extension in particular got quite a few improvements, all of which or the vast majority of which we just shipped yesterday. And actually, Anton, I meant to ask you, there was an issue with the Firefox marketplace where they were having some database issues and we couldn't upload the new package yesterday. Have you tried again this morning or later?
No, I haven't tried, but I can give it a try right now.
Okay. I did see that it looks like the new versions are already live for both Chrome, amazingly, which usually takes up to a week. It's live, and for Edge.
We are talking about 0.10 it was, or 0.08?
Yeah, 0.10 is already,
Wow.
I got the auto update when I opened up my machine this morning. So
That's
all these
cool.
fixes are out. And so we just need to get the Firefox extension. Hopefully the upload will work today. So
I had to do it from Mac, right?
Yeah, you had it on your Mac.
No, actually it was from I can download it from the eSIM. Like I think I uploaded to the pinned version, to the pinned issue on GitHub about the browser extension.
Yes, you did. So you can pull it from there.
I need to drink my coffee.
Okay, so yeah, skipping back from that though, one of the big items that we did this sprint was Anton went and improved Connector Puppeteer so that we could support two-step authentication, like what's used for Azure Active Directory. Get the words in the right order. And so basically a scenario where you have a separate page for entering the username versus the password. So now we support a submit step for just the username, and so you can have a following page to submit the password. And that was published a couple days ago. I think 2 days ago, we got the NPM packages up with that change. Then in the VS Code extension, we started on transpiled language support. So this sprint, we were able to get less and Sass support in. Those are new parsers in the core system, so it's technically a little broader than just the VS Code extension. It also applies to using the CLI when you're running it against the local file system, as opposed to against a web server. So those are enabled by default as part of our configuration development, which is used by the CLI for local file system files and the VS Code extension. And the way that they're hooked in basically means that you'll get the same, all the existing hints that we have around CSS will now light up if you're using one of those pre-processed languages. One of the other big items that I spent a fair amount of time on this sprint was integrating the publishing of our extensions into our release script, so that now, and Anton got to help debug that firsthand the past couple of days as we went through together with the updates to the release script, working through releasing everything. The important point being is now it gets the same, uses the same logic as all of our NPM packages for updating, bumping version numbers, and then telling us when to submit. In the case of the VS Code extension, there's a command line tool to publish so we could integrate it fully into our release script. In the case of the browser extensions, most of them require us to upload via a web portal. And so we just have a message as part of the release script telling you where to go update the package or upload the package that we built. So there's still a little bit of a manual step involved to get those uploaded. It'd be cool, maybe at some point in the future, we could use Puppeteer to drive the web portals and do it for us. But for now, we'll stick with the manual step. And then Rachel, I know you've got proposed updates to the homepage that you posted onto the GitHub issue this sprint. And I think most of us have taken a first look through it. And I don't know if I've commented yet, but I think we're largely really liking them. So Anton, I forget if you had left, I think you had left one comment for a small tweak.
In the notes for the webhint page?
Yeah.
I left a few.
A few, okay.
Yeah, they were great. And I think
and those are just my comments. No, like something that should be done or not, but maybe something we should discuss. So it's not. Like
I think it'd be great too if there are any like big structural changes. It didn't seem like there were. In that case, we could go ahead and start, thinking about the redesign and layout. Things like word changes, of course, are easy to do, or little tweaks to the text, which I think was the majority of the feedback, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. I should go. You keep talking. I'm going to try to find the issue and open it up here.
Oh yeah, sure. But yeah, if the general structure of it looks good, then I don't see any reason to wait on. I mean, I'm happy to make those tweaks as well, but just the sort of basic layout and flow of the content, then we can go ahead and start thinking about if we want to commission new artwork or have Stephanie take a look at the design.
Yeah, I really do like the kind of the focus on the 3 cycles that you pulled together there, and then now I assume I meant, so yeah, the try it is where we would have kind of the existing entry point for the online scanner, and then kind of the call to action at the end. I think the flow of those 3 sections is really good. So other than any minor wordsmithing we want to do, I mean, I think that we're all pretty happy with the structure.
Yep.
Cool.
So nice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see, one of the other things I know David spent a lot of time on this sprint was experimenting with getting our online worker, the piece that actually runs webhint and needs to be able to run instance of Chromium running in a serverless context. We definitely ran into a few different hiccups. I don't know, David, do you want to talk to that a little bit? Kind of what we ran into, what we learned, where we're at?
Sure. So I've been taking a look to the serverless using Docker, because right now we cannot use Chromium inside the Azure function. Also because we cannot run an extra process inside an Azure function. So you cannot do that. So I've been trying the Docker image, which is cool. The only thing was like with the developer instances, it was like a little bit slow, and we got a lot of timeouts. But yesterday, the first try I did to the production environment, it looks better. So yeah, let's see. I need to run the test a couple more times. But yeah, everything looks better. So the times in general, I mean, we also get some timeouts, but we got less. And then the average time, it was like much better with those machines. So let's see what happened today.
Right. And then assuming that all keeps moving forward, then our next step is kind of figuring out how we want to integrate it into the deployment along with the other serverless work we had done.
Yeah. Yeah, because we need.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, continue.
No, that we need to take into account, because yesterday I was trying to add the worker to the current project, and yeah, there is few things we need to take into account.
Yeah, I think from talking with Utsav, it sounded like we'd be able to, if we take the existing functions which need to be deployed together and the worker which needs to be deployed separately since it needs to go to an app service, we can take those existing functions into their own subfolder and configure the Azure Pipelines workflow to kind of deploy that subfolder as a single group of functions to the consumption plan.
Yeah.
So. Now, one other thing that came up, I think you had asked about, and no one had gotten you a good answer, was whether we could look at trying this out on AWS, and if we had any access to AWS resources or could get some to see how we could get it to work there.
I think it was just to compare or to double check that Chromium is supported by default in Lambda. But
at least from the reading I've done, I think there's still a little bit of work, especially because we've been using the serverless library. I don't know if we're picking that up with the worker or not, or if that's just for the other functions.
I don't know.
Okay, because I know there's steps to get Chrome running on Lambda. And then there's kind of some additional work to try to make it all work well with the serverless library, at least from the reading I've done. And it would be nice for us to be able to confirm that, even though we know we're going to host on Azure, to get some resources to confirm that we have the cross-cloud capability. I don't know who might be able to help out there. Anton, if you...
We can talk with, or we can send an email to John to make sure that they are okay with us using the Amex to do some testing.
Okay.
I'm sure that AWS has some free things that we can use at least for testing, and then we can kill the account or do something like that. So I don't know if John will answer before he's back from Japan, but I can send him an email and make a note here.
Okay. All right. Anything else to discuss around serverless at this point?
So the speed improvements is when you switch to P1v2 or P2v2 or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was P2v2.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we just have to keep throwing more money.
Okay. So kind of back into the list of fixes, we had quite a bit of, let's see, we had a few pieces of feedback from Harold, and then quite a bit of feedback from, I think his name was Thomas, Tom, that we interacted with. His site helped identify a whole bunch of good issues in kind of the browser extension, and in, I think, a couple in more core pieces that we were going through and fixing. And then actually this first one I think came out of the serverless work from David.
Yep.
Where we discovered there were situations using Connector Puppeteer where we were getting cached responses, even though we were trying to request without the cache so that we can analyze all the original headers and everything. And so Anton went through and fixed that. Then this was related to an issue Harold had opened, where a limitation in Firefox right now is that if you've got content security policy enabled on a website that doesn't allow inline scripts, we can't inject some of the scripts we need to do analysis. We can't work around that, but we can improve how we handle the failure, which is what we did. Before, it was just timing out after 3 minutes. Now we're able to recognize that we were unable to start the process within a second and quickly switch to an error page with a message mentioning that it might have been due to CSP restrictions.
This was the only thing that we wanted to fix before removing the experimental checkbox, right?
Yes, this was the last thing.
Okay, then I've removed the experimental checkbox. I just published the extension on Firefox. So.
Great, awesome, because I'm glad you got that while we were doing the publishing too. Thanks, Anton. Similar to kind of on the related set of feedback, we identified some scenarios where we were missing response headers for various reasons. Some of these were kind of cache related or multi-request related. So there were fixes to the browser extension to take care of that. One of the sources was requests coming from service workers. I think, did this only affect Chrome, Anton? Or Chromium?
Yes, I couldn't reproduce it on Firefox. So these two were kind of related. So we had like duplicate requests from service workers depending on how it was configured, but those didn't show up in Firefox. And the other was that in private mode, some resources weren't downloaded by the browser, like the favicon. So we fall back to a fetch to download it ourselves. And then that's when we had the missing headers.
Good news is we've got all that cleaned up now and released. Also kind of on a similar vein, if there were other extensions installed that were making requests, and I think this one also showed up only in Chromium instances, we'd actually receive events for like requests from other Chrome extensions that started with Chrome extension and then the rest of the path if they were accessing one of their own resources. So we're able to filter those out. I think this still leaves open the possibility that if an extension is making a request to a public URL, we don't really know the difference. And so I don't think we've had a specific repro there, but that might be another scenario we could potentially run into down the line.
Yep. Or if they are injecting a script into the page, like inline script or something like that.
Yeah, we did for requests our own extension initiates. We already had added last sprint a piece of code to make sure that we ignore those when we get the events for them. But yeah, it's just one of the, as we get feedback in the future, something to keep in mind that we may want to start adding to the list to test disabling other extensions if it seems that we're getting resources that don't make sense for the site at hand. And then, yeah, this was another piece of feedback originally from Harold, and then Anton, you had a follow-up to it for different specific rel values that were getting flagged by Hint Compat API that are really just used for progressive enhancement. And after some discussion, we looked through the list of kind of how rel is used and decided that really all of the usage that is interesting could be considered progressive enhancement. And so we've added just any of the rel values to the default ignore list for the compat hints. And then the minified JS hint, when it was reporting for inline scripts, was proving not to be super helpful because the resource URL being reported each time was the page that the inline script was in without context on which inline script was triggering the message. So if you had 4 of them, you just had 4 logs for the same URL and you didn't know which script in the page to go look at. And so I was able to improve this one to provide the, to plumb through the reference to the actual script element. So in contexts like the browser extension, you can actually click the inspect element button like we do for others and jump straight to that script in the elements panel. And if that script was originally in the source code, we get the correct line and character offset so that you can jump to it or get the right reference from the online scanner as well. And then this last one's still a little bit in flight, but
can you do a demo of it?
Huh?
Can you do a demo, because it's pretty cool?
Let's see.
Before and after.
I don't. I'll have to do a demo later. I don't have a build up with it right now. But so this is. Let's see. This started with a piece of feedback from Harold and also a piece of confusion that Anton had on one of the logs from the compat APIs. So today, and actually I might have. Let's just see. I can at least show the today behavior.
Mm-hmm. Maybe select all the browsers, like the default. Or...
Yeah, so today when we get a log for something from the compat API, we're reporting the browser names using the same tokens as browsers list because that's where we're getting them from. And we're showing you the version ranges that were selected as part of the target browsers. And so what's interesting is kind of 2 pieces. One, these names aren't always super human readable. Like you can figure out that that's iOS Safari. And then I think Android ones are &_FF for Firefox on Android. I mean, they get a little bit more esoteric. And then kind of these version ranges can be a little bit confusing too. I don't have one of the Firefox ones up here, but the browsers list query brings in the LTS version of Firefox in addition to the last 2 versions, which when something does report for Firefox leads to something that says not supported by Firefox 60, 65 through 66. Because it's just telling you about the versions that were part of the target list, the last 2 versions in the LTS version. But it kind of, at a glance, implies that somehow the feature was supported in between those versions, which it wasn't. And so what the update does here is provides more human readable names. So it'll actually say iOS space Safari with expected capitalization. And Firefox space Android for those different browsers. And those are pulled from the MDN data, which has kind of the friendly names in the data set for each of the browsers. And then the version ranges are being changed. Instead of reporting out versions based on the target browsers, it's reporting out versions based on when features were when support was added for features. So if a given browser has never had support, it would just say, yeah, Sticky's not supported by iOS Safari. It's never been added, so listing the specific versions you were targeting isn't really adding valuable information. Say, you had a feature for Firefox that had been added in Firefox 67, then it would say not supported by Firefox less than 67 if you had 65, 66, and 60 in your target list. And so it's kind of aligning in a way more closely with what you would see in VS Code, where they're listing support across different browsers as well. And I mean, as far as this hint goes, then that same formatting is going to show up not only in the browser extension, but in the online scanner, CLI, VS Code, everywhere. So we're kind of excited to have that one improved.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Which, that it ties nicely with the next item. It's like,
Yes. So ties nicely with starting to talk about next sprint. Now, as I think most everyone hears,
yeah, V1, especially the V1 browser extension. Like, is there anything else we want to add?
So at this point, I'll let anyone else chime in if there's something they know of, but I'm not aware of anything else we need to do feature work-wise before cutting V1. I think it's just coordinating on publishing an announcement.
Yep. I mean, there is only one thing I want to do, but I don't think it's blocking for V1, and it's a lightweight compression hint to be run through the browser. But I mean, if I can get it before the release, awesome. If not, we can do it for a 1.1.
Okay, yeah, I definitely would agree. I don't think that's blocking, but if it makes it in, that'd be great.
Yeah. I haven't started yet, so.
Any idea what time frame we might be looking at from some of the conversations you've been having so far?
Rachel, you're mute.
Yeah. I think it would be perfectly reasonable. Well, my guess is maybe Monday, not this coming Monday, but the Monday after that.
23rd, okay.
Yep. And that'll give us time to, write any blog posts we want to do and reach out to other folks who might be able to amplify that. So I guess like Monday is being the announce, and then I guess it's flexible when all that stuff goes live, but before that, I guess would be my guess.
Yeah, and it's a little tough to call, especially on the submissions for the Chrome version of the browser extension, because sometimes it's taken up to 7 days, sometimes it's been 4, and yesterday it happened overnight. So I don't know what to expect. If the goal is, I assume, our goal is to have all of the updates already live when we publish the announcement, so everyone can go and who reads it can go and get the version and not be waiting on it.
Okay. Rachel, have you had the time to read the email with Jory?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, and I'm planning to reply to that after this meeting.
Okay, perfect. Then I agree with Rachel. It's probably going to be or the 23rd or sometime that week. Next week, I think, is too tight, and I think that we want to talk also with Harald, see if he has any other piece of feedback or something else that he thinks should be fixed, and help us maybe with a blog post from his side.
And at least from the conversation we had with him 2 weeks ago, the end of last sprint, the CSP issue was, at least of the known issues we had at the time, the one thing he wanted to make sure we had in before.
Yep, and that's you fixed it. So that's cool.
Cool, and kind of along the same vein, I think once we get V1 of the browser extension out, I think we're getting really close to talking about taking the VS Code extension out of preview. I'm not really calling it a V1 because of the way the publishing ended up working for that one. It's marked as preview, but it's already at 1.1 right now. But we'd like to remove the preview label in the VS Code extension store when we think we're ready. I think there is additional work here before we're ready anyway. So kind of timing wise, it lines up well with the cadence of get the browser extension buttoned up first and then move on to the VS Code extension. Specifically here, I think we might want to bring in a little bit more support for transpiled languages. That's really the big one I'm still thinking of. Probably the biggest one top of mind for me is TypeScript, given its popularity in the community right now.
You have can you switch to ZenHub? There's a column with the VS Code and some tasks that.
Oh yeah, let me clear the milestone filter.
Yeah, you can also make the VS Code extension pipeline even bigger.
With resize it or
expand pipeline.
There we go.
We have 2 columns now.
Do that multiple times. There we go. 3 columns.
Nice.
Today I learned Cool. Yeah, so we kind of have an epic we've been sitting on for transpiled language support. I don't think we fully filled that out in terms of subtasks. Obviously, TypeScript's sitting in there. JSX would be nice for the HTML hints. I think that one's going to be its own challenge because any transpilation we're going to do just gets us to JavaScript, and really we're wanting to be able to plumb through to the hints that require a DOM to do their analysis. So I think there'll be that's going to be the most difficult one to pull off, and maybe not one we would choose to block on. I do think some of the other, sorry, Anton, did you have a comment?
Yeah, do you think that JSX is less important than TypeScript?
I definitely think it's less important than TypeScript in terms of how, I mean, I don't know the current, React's pretty popular, but I still think that from the numbers I recall seeing, TypeScript's like hit serious critical mass in terms of adoption in the community.
Yeah, my question is mainly because we create the transpilation. We don't have a lot of JavaScript
hints. Yeah,
So
you're right.
Support for TypeScript is nice, but it's not going to highlight any of the other work that we've done already. So we'll have to create something more to make it shine.
Yeah, we have a few hints in the script space right now. And you're right, that may kind of, even though TypeScript's broadly used, the fact that we don't have a broad set of hints that apply to script in general may diminish how important that has to be. Obviously, I think the most coverage we get right now are for anything that ultimately ends up as CSS or as HTML.
Yep.
And so like something like the view single file components or some other templating systems may be interesting to look at. I'd kind of held off filing a task for every arbitrary templating system that we've ever heard of. I'd like to drive this a little bit more by adoption and focus on the ones that are most broadly used. If we can pick up a good resource to look at to kind of help inform that.
Rachel, do you have any source about that? Or anyone in your team?
Do I have any what? Sorry.
Any source for popularity of frameworks, template systems, and such?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like my gut is these three also, but I can look into that and see if we have any like telemetry or any feedback from, DevRel folks or anything like that.
My initial thought had been, like, I know NPM has published data on packages and popularity that we could probably look into, and Stack Overflow has run a bunch of surveys that I think covered a lot of front-end frameworks as well. That's been kind of an annual thing. So we should have something from each of those that should be within a year of currency. That we could
also be interesting to just like ask folks on Twitter, like, hey, do you use WebHint? Are there like transpiled languages that you wish were supported? It's just, yet another signal, but we could sort of focus in on folks that are already using WebHint.
Yeah.
I've added an action item to the live notes for you to investigate that.
Cool.
But yeah, I know that Less and Sass were pretty big ones that we ran into trying to build some of our own demos. And so having those already knocked out quickly made sense. And then I just want to make sure we don't focus on something that isn't going to actually get activated too often when people are using it. I think we'll get into the tail in time, but when we're talking V1.
Yep.
Okay. Still on that subject, actually, outside of transpilation, we have other feature ideas that I'm not sure are blocking for V1, but would be useful down the line. I think things like including actions and automatic fixes along with the reports I don't think has to be blocking coming out of preview. And in fact, there may still be more research and discussion we want to do before going too far down this route, but it's definitely one of the ideas we've been kicking around for a while. And this is implementation wise, this has to be plumbed down all the way through to the hints, because the hint ultimately has to be able to provide the context. So I think this is post V1. Agreed?
Yep. Probably the 2222.
222. Yes. So location work in general, there's this one and there's a couple others where we can do a better job of pointing at an context for a report. So like today, specifically for compiler options, if we have a report about a specific compiler option that would be better in the non-default state, oftentimes that means the flag isn't there in the tsconfig JSON at all. And we'll end up just reporting the location to the start of the file, since the name isn't in the file at all. But since it is a compiler option, and often the compiler options section is there, that this could be a good thing to kind of help bring that closer to the context where a user needs to make the change by falling back to the compiler options. Along similar lines, there's an issue I think I had filed, I don't know if I associated with the VS Code extension yet, around reports for in HTML and markup.
It's in the same pipeline. I moved it yesterday.
Okay. For targeting attributes and attribute values, today when we report something relative to an element, it's just underlining the element. And so we can kind of help if the request is to change an attribute or to change the value of a specific attribute, being able to move the location so that we're actually drawing the user's attention specifically to the value that needs changed is kind of the ask there. And then the third piece is that today all of our reports are points. We just have a single location, line and column that we report. And in some contexts, like when we're highlighting, a lot of times VS Code does a pretty good job of just highlighting the rest of what's nearby. So like when we point to the start of a tag name, it underlines the full tag name. But sometimes, like with CSS selectors, if we point to the start of a selector and it's a class name selector, so it starts with a dot, VS Code will just underline the dot. Now, we have the ability to provide a start and end position representing a range to VS Code, so that if we plumb through exactly what the exact range that we want to draw attention to, then we can show that in VS Code and kind of avoid some of these scenarios where we're only underlining one character today.
Do you want to open maybe an epic for VS Code out of preview? Something like that, and we can start linking issues?
Sure.
Or do we want to do it later? I don't know. I mean, that will...
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to create it this second, but yeah, I think we should do that after this meeting.
Yeah. Or at least, I mean, we need to start planning for the next sprint, so maybe we can start adding things to do.
It looks like there might already be one, right? Like 1647 is an epic VS Code extension improvements.
Yeah, we could rename it. The thing is that we are going to have like V1. There are a lot of those things that are tied to that one, but we don't want to blocking those.
Yeah, it's just an epic where we can pull over just the pieces we feel are blocking for taking it out of preview.
Just because I'm thinking that probably John and Megan and probably Brendan want to know, okay, what are we missing before we ship the VS Code extension as V1? And then that way they can see it right away.
All right, so we'll make this one an epic. I'm going to keep it fairly simple. And then we can start attaching stuff to it.
Or just create it, cancel. Just click on create epic.
Oh, it didn't create it yet?
and then create epic. Now this is for adding the task, but just click on create epic. That will be faster if we do it from the
Yeah, because I wanted to do it from here.
Yeah, then you can multi-edit if you want, I believe. If you click on the three dots, you can select issue, and then you can select multiple ones.
Yeah, and then set epic.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that's more of a bug fix one that I think we'd really like to do. In terms of the other pieces, actually, we hadn't talked about validating the size of our extension bundle, but that's probably a good one for us to pick up here because it helps us make sure we didn't accidentally pull in. We've been using this successfully with our browser extension to make sure we don't accidentally pull in a dependency we didn't mean to. And having kind of a near threshold on the extension bundle size is a great way to realize when when it bumps up by 60K, it's like, hey, I must have referenced something that pulled in more than I thought it would.
About 2076, the first one.
Okay, this is where I wish I could also open and here. I'm just going to go and set those two to the epic because I want to.
That's the one where we are starting underlining one sometimes before in the name, sometimes before. So
just get those over there. Oh, they're in two epics now.
Failure.
Always nuance.
Yeah. Otherwise, WhatsApp will not be happy.
Okay, so this guy. Yeah, this is the one where we were talking about doing the range. If we provide an in position, yeah. I do think for the overall experience, this is a good one to look at, but it requires updates to individual hints. So it's not a single fix. This is something we'll have to kind of do across a couple pieces of shared infrastructure and potentially a number of individual hints to achieve. It starts with us having to introduce an enhancement to our position object to allow for an end to the position in addition to just the start. Given most of the time we're getting this in a place that's reasonable, I don't know if I consider it blocking. It certainly would be a nice to have.
Okay.
Any other?
How soon do you want to ship the V1? Like by the end of next sprint?
It's a fair question. Any thoughts? What's your opinion, Anton?
I think we are going to have, or I hope we are going to have a lot of feedback out of the browser extension that we will have to fix. So I don't think that realistically we can make it to the next publish it at the end of the next sprint.
So maybe 2 sprints out, like mid-October?
Also take into account that, so UTSAP is going to be out. Rachel and I are going to Amsterdam to ViewSource, and you are coming next week. So I would say that next sprint is going to be a bit dead in general.
I actually wonder, some of y'all know we had some interest from a hackathon, a group that wanted to hack on WebHint. And I wonder if this would be a good choice. They were asking for some like project-sized things to take on. And this one seems like fairly straightforward. I wonder if that would be a good thing.
That's a fantastic idea. I think this would be a great fit for that. Because it has a lot of, there's going to be some kind of common architecture work and then some chasing down of existing pieces to tie everything together and a lot of testing and all in the context of VS Code. yeah, I think it could make a great hackathon project.
So
Also-
actually, one thing I want to do, and I don't know that we need to create a task for it, but I want to actually go through our repos and clean up and add and remove where necessary. We have some like good first issue tags and some hackathon tags explicitly for these very things. So I can add that, or I guess we could add that tag now. But that's one thing I'd like to do next week is start to like clean up some of those tags so that we make sure that ones that have been tagged with hackathon or good first issue are still true, and if there are new ones that we go ahead and add those tags as well.
Is that the tag we're looking at here?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean that's
I think that's from last year, actually.
from last year. Yeah,
that's the one for. Yeah, this is the one for October. Usually, the ones for Oktoberfest are like good first issues for people just starting into the project, not for like a full day hackathon with more people. So
Okay, so we should label.
I would create a new label.
Yeah.
Another thing to take into account is that I really want to get WSL2 support sooner rather than later because my laptop is driving me crazy.
Yes. And it sounds like WSL2 is looking like a really good perf improvement for you.
Yes, so I want to get that done.
Yeah,
And there was,
I mean, that's a workflow improvement. I see no problem with bringing that into the next sprint for you to work on.
and there is also the issue that we discussed, especially for the hackathon, to improve the first run contribution experience or the first contribution experience that I think we should also try to tackle sooner rather than later, especially for the hackathon, if we are going to have multiple people or even if we start having more eyeballs into the project.
Yeah.
So maybe for this sprint, we have a few VS Code tasks and then like low hanging fruit or things like that that are not specifically to any of the extensions or other work and try to get those out of the way.
Yeah, and I think we're still kind of halfway through the thought process though of at least marking what do we want to, because we weren't dragging into the sprint yet. We still want to finish up marking what do we consider blocking for taking the VS Code extension out of preview.
No, yeah, it was more for the when do we want to ship the VS Code extension kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely looking at mid to late October from the discussion we've just been having.
Yeah, I'd say like November. Mid-November.
Yeah, I think that's
how
smart.
things go.
Focused on bug fixes and stuff after the browser.
Okay, doesn't look like I can create a label from right here.
No, you can do it from GitHub.
I can do that.
I think that you'll have to refresh then.
Yeah, I'll have to refresh to pick it up, but I can do that. Yeah, I'll close that for now, but let me know and then we can get it labeled because I do think that what you said, I think that'd be great for the hackathon. Along a similar vein, actually, although I think this one's probably too involved because there's a lot of domain knowledge required in thinking about fixes that's more than it's beyond just learning the code. I don't know if we're far enough along that I'd recommend this one for the hackathon yet. Okay, so I think we should pull in at least views. So specifically wanted to pull in view single file components, I think, for taking it out of preview, in part because I know that the overall effort here should be relatively small. The single file components effectively are HTML files in look. The things we would have to fix around it are things we should be looking for templates in general, which is how do we parse something that's a fragment of HTML and not provide hints around an HTML document. So we don't need to tell you about meta tags in the head and that you set that you've set a title or you have a lang on your HTML element, right? And I think this is going to apply to any templating language we start enabling. So might as well start here. Apart from that, I mean, the single file components represent things as script tags, style tags, template tags. And so should naturally flow through our HTML parser. And then they have like a lang attribute they use to specify when a style tag might be using Sass instead of CSS. And we can easily tweak our parsers to pick up on that. Actually, as I did the Sass parser, I just went ahead and built it with that support since I had been reading about this earlier. And I think there's a similar thing for TypeScript in the script tag for people who may have enabled that for their single file components. So I actually don't think there's a huge amount of work here. So I definitely think we should bring it in for for taking the extension out of preview. Not sure if it's the next sprint yet in terms of when we should do it, but
Yeah.
does it sound okay to everyone else?
That's to me.
And by the way, I did add the hackathon label to the hint repo, and I went ahead and added that label to the error locations issue we were just looking at.
Okay, thank you.
You see it there now.
This is one that I came up with. I was starting to look at just what we were getting for analytics, and it dawned on me that for the VS Code extension, we're usually we're analyzing one file at a time, which where in the browser extension, we're usually looking at like a whole page, right? So you're getting all hints are potentially active. But when we're analyzing a file in the VS Code extension, we're really only potentially going to fail hints that relate to that file type. So like a CSS file isn't going to trigger hardly any of our accessibility hints on its own. And it's certainly not going to trigger hints about HTML elements. And so what happens is then when we're logging the status of all of these hints, it's just a whole bunch of passes that wouldn't have possibly failed. And I think to kind of look through that, and when we're trying to answer the question of which hints are more impactful, like what's actually triggering on more content, what's being fixed more often, we may want to be, or I think we will want to be able to, in the source code space, separate this by the type of file that's being analyzed, because we're looking at one file at a time. And as such, I think this is something we should do sooner rather than later. Thoughts?
Okay. Yes.
I have a question. I have two questions. So sorry, it's probably in here and I missed it, but is it, let's say you have a project open, would it log every file in the project, or like how would it, what's the filtering mechanism?
So right now, we only run the analysis in the VS Code extension when the file is open. So if you open a workspace, but you haven't actually opened a file, we're not analyzing anything. Our extension doesn't even get activated until you open a file of one of the types that we're registered for. So you actually have to open like a JavaScript file for editing or an HTML file for editing. And that's when this would take place.
Okay. So that's great. That actually sort of leads into my next question, which was if we land this, we could potentially also find out like the answer to this question of like JSX, TypeScript, Vue. If we're logging the file types, would we not be able to see like what file types our users are opening? Even though we may not be running WebHint against those file types today, we can at least see when they're open and then use that telemetry to help guide decisions like this in the future.
Only if we've thought about those file types in advance. So we can, yes. This ties back to, we only get activated for file types that our extension registers for.
Yeah.
So we can explicitly list things like .vue for the single file components, even before we've implemented support. We won't end up, our extension will get spun up and run. We won't end up analyzing it, but then we have Well, I mean, we will end up running web hint. You won't get any hints because
Right,
there's
right.
nothing that's going to trigger on it, but we will run a scan where everything passes, and we'll have the type of the file extension basically if we had done this work. So in a limited sense, yes, right? If we have ones that we're theorizing about, we can kind of put out feelers in a sense to see if they're as important as we think they are. But we're not going to discover things that we haven't thought about at all.
Correct. Yeah.
I'd like to take this one into the current sprint or into the next sprint. That
we haven't created a new milestone yet, right? Or have you created it?
I have.
Oh, yes. Awesome.
All right, we're running over already. So if anyone needs to go, let me know. Otherwise, I think we still kind of have a little bit of planning discussion to continue here.
Yeah, I just have an 11.
Okay, I'll have to go in a few minutes, but I've got a little bit more time. Okay. The extension bundle, validating the size, that's also one I feel we need to get on sooner rather than later. And yes, the sound of Anton's desk moving is cool. You just lift the whole building up, right?
No, I just actually lower it.
Oh, lower it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was.
You're getting taller.
Yeah, 1 hour standing and barely moving is enough for me.
Okay, so I think we should do the bundle size validation as well here in the next sprint. So, because the longer we wait, the more likely we might slip something in that we didn't mean to.
Okay. Oh. So Malbov is encouraging us on the YouTube channel. Thank you.
All right, and then I don't think there was anything else here that has to be pulled into the next sprint. I know the automated testing is something that we're actually, it's not marked as blocked, but we are blocked on. We looked into this a couple of sprints ago, and it still required closing all open VS Code instances, which was a real pain to integrate into our test workflow. It would work okay in CI, but for us running the tests locally, it's really annoying. Okay, so I think that's maybe enough talking about the VS Code extension, unless there was anything else here someone wanted to put as a blocker for coming out of preview at the moment. We didn't mark TypeScript files or anything, but Anton's counter argument kind of made me think maybe we don't have to.
Yeah, I think that with Vue, it should be enough.
Okay.
I know.
I'm also okay if we don't get everything pulled into the sprint right now. I mean, we should feel free to pull things into the backlog after we're done here, and we can kind of continue to discuss and shift things around. Was there anything else top of mind for anyone?
Yeah, WSL2.
That one. Yeah, I agree. We should do this.
And there is the PR for the severity that if you could, I know that Tony and David have already took a look. I updated it, I think that yesterday with more images and some comments, but Rachel, I'd love to have your input as well. Because it's a pretty significant change of what we are doing, at least kind of philosophically, but I think it will help a lot the end user.
We should get this done too, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
We've got it turned on everywhere else now.
I guess that the serverless is still going to
Yeah,
at least one more week.
Kind kind of keep going here. We'll move.
I have one more item that might be browser extension related. There was some feedback based on the SF HTML5 demo about in the browser extension how what the numbers refer to, the little lozenge numbers. So after this I'll post a screenshot and see if that's something we want to tackle.
Yeah, these were the number. Okay, so the numbers in this part.
Just basically at left where it says 4 out of 7, and then at the right where it says do those numbers add up? Like in this case, it does.
In this case, they look like they do, but they are not related.
Yeah, in some case, yeah.
Okay, so there's some confusion about that.
Yeah.
Should it be? Yeah, no, not the opposite.
Yeah, because
yeah.
I think in some of those they do not add up. There does not seem to be a correlation.
Yeah, the correlation is at the top level. Obviously, it's worth discussing because it's not clear. But just so I can state what it is. So there are 3. We passed 4 out of 7. So you can see 4 passed out of 7 top level hints here. So 3 failed.
Yeah.
So that's the relationship to the number. And then the individual report counts are just how many reports came from a specific hint. So it doesn't relate to the number on the left. Number on the left is just a top level, how many of these different top level hints had any reports.
Yeah.
There is one thing, if we end up implementing the severity change, that yellow dot will probably have to change.
Yeah, it's already yellow or red, depending on whether there had been a higher severity report. So if you configure, I don't think we have anything on this site, since we try to keep webhin.io pretty clean.
Didn't we set it up as warnings only in the extension?
Originally, but we've already, so when we refactored the accessibility hints, like I said, I don't think I'm gonna get anything to trigger here, but maybe I'll be surprised.
Well, if you put I8, I'm sure that you can trigger something.
But yeah, some of these, so we actually do a mapping from the severity reported by ACTS to our severity. So if they say the impact is critical or high, then we map it to an error. If it's medium or low, we map it to a warning.
So, I mean, I agree with what Rachel said. It's it took me a few seconds to know which number was related to what thing.
Yeah.
And looking at the screenshot now, I think I understand an additional layer of confusion, which is that in the screenshot, the person had showed past hints turned off.
So you didn't even see the number that would have possibly correlated to the one shown on the left, since we're counting what passed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I get it's correct, but it is potentially confusing to someone who's using it for the first time. So I don't actually know what the right fix is. But yeah, if I think this one, it was CNN.com. If you want.
Yeah, I don't have to go through it right now, but I understand. Yeah. And as I said before, I agree. I think it's worth discussion. We'll want to make sure we pull Stephanie into that as well.
Yep.
So. All right, I'm gonna move us back here. You had an issue for that, you said?
No, I'll create one.
Okay. Yeah, I doubt for the next sprint, we might be able to kick off some of the discussion. I know people have different conferences and stuff they're going to, so it might take us a little bit to kind of arrive at any changes we might want to do.
Yeah, Stephanie is out most of the time, so.
But definitely worth getting it started.
Sounds good.
Okay, so knowing that we also have the serverless work continuing, I'm kind of inclined, unless there's anything else top of mind right now, to stop with what we've already moved in. I know there's not enough to fill the full sprint yet, but we're expecting feedback and some other stuff to kind of come in. And I think we can continue to kind of add on this, come back together on Monday. And I'd say as we start the day on Monday, try to make sure we have the sprint fully filled out. Does that sound all okay to everyone else?
Yeah, that sounds fine. We can also, you're coming in 2 weeks, right?
Yes, so half the sprint, I'm not really available to do a lot of coding.
No, I was looking that maybe we should also reprioritize all the different pipelines, just so we know what we should grab if we end up with our backlog to grab the next item.
All right.
But yeah, we can do that next week.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I think we'll wrap up for now and talk again soon.
Yeah, David, go to the bed. Rachel, go back home.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone rest, get healthy. All right.
All right.
Okay. Enjoy the weekend.
Bye.
Bye.